there are some people, at least I think there are some people. I mean, I can't believe it's possible, but I've heard that there are some people who, well, maybe it's just a rumour or a legend, and I can hardly make myself say it. I've heard that there are some people who read ahead, open up a book and look at the last page to see where the story goes before they decide whether they're going to bother reading the story or not. I know. And there are kids listening as well. I'm sorry. Maybe I should have had a warning on this that I was going to say some really disturbing things. Can you even imagine something so awful? I said today that we were looking at chapter 3 in something called the Revelation. There's not really much point coming right into the middle of a story. Although in our lives, each one of us comes into the middle of a story. We don't have any choice in that. But let me catch you up on this letter. We're looking together at a letter called the Revelation. And it was written, we think, round about the end of the first century, about AD 90, by someone who calls himself John. Someone who is in a kind of lockdown himself. The empire of the time has placed him on an island to try and keep him quiet, but he doesn't want to, he doesn't have to, because he's inspired and he can write, he is creative. And so he writes to fellow Jesus followers in Asia Minor. And he writes a message that he calls the Revelation, which means an uncovering or a revealing of deep truths. And this is a message of encouragement to groups of Jesus followers in churches, part of a movement that has grown over the last 60 years after the life and the death and the resurrection of someone called Jesus of Nazareth, who completely turned things upside down. In this letter, the first part was a description of the Jesus that John is uncovering. And it's not a Jesus who is stuck 60 years ago or a Jesus trapped in a set of stories. Instead, this is a risen, living Jesus, described actually in a riot of metaphors and symbols and images that are all cut and paste and mixed and matched and come from the other 65 books in this collection we call the Bible. There's actually nothing new in this letter called the Revelation. Then this risen Jesus speaks, and John records some mini messages to 7 different groups of Jesus followers in 7 cities around Asia Minor, actually representative. The letter is for everyone who is a Jesus follower. At this point, the message in the start of chapter 3 is for a place called Sardis. And for the group of Jesus followers in Sardis, it's less of a catch up than a wake up. What Jesus says to them is that he knows about them. He knows about them. But what do we know about them? Not that much, actually. Sardis is famous for being a city, literally a city on a hill. It has an acropolis, or it had an acropolis or a fortress on the top of a mighty cliff, about 1,500 feet tall. And it was famous, or at least it should have been famous, for being unconquerable, unassailable. Except what it was really famous for is for being conquered. Not just once, but twice. Around 600 years before that, 549 BC, a leader called Cyrus from Persia sent a climber up in the night who found there were no guards, and the guards who were there had gone to sleep because it was unconquerable. And so the gate was opened and the city was taken over. And then that happened again in 218 BC when somebody called Antiochus did exactly the same thing, sent up a group of climbers who could climb the cliff that couldn't apparently be climbed. And the same thing happened again. You'd think they'd have learned the first time. Jesus' message to this church is from, he says, someone who holds the sevenfold, or the seven spirits of God. That talks about God's presence. And the seven spirits of God, the seven stars in his hands. This is part of the image that was given of Jesus at the start of this letter. And it's also a poke in the eye to the empire of the time, because the emperor of the Roman Empire has been declaring himself God and saying everybody should worship him and saying he's the one who holds the stars in his sky. And John and Jesus here are saying, no, there's only one person who holds the stars in the sky, and that is Jesus, who is also the Son of God. And not only is he holding the stars in the sky, he's holding the stars, the seven stars, and we've been told already these stars represent these groups of Jesus followers, in his hands. Jesus is standing in their midst, not far away, sitting in a cloud, or in the history. He's right there with them, holding them in his hands. And as comforting as it is, he knows. In most cases, that is hugely comforting, that somebody knows, that somebody understands. But in this case, it's awkward for the group of Jesus followers in Sardis, because Jesus says, I know your deeds. You have a reputation for being alive, but you are dead, or nearly dead, as it comes to pass in what he's saying. It seems like, and we don't really know the facts, but it seems like they have a reputation for being a good group of Jesus followers, for being a good church. Perhaps they have lots of activities or things that they talk about, or maybe they have plenty of money. But the truth is, Jesus says they are dead. So something is not right. He says, in fact, wake up! And again, he's playing on their reputation as a city and their history. The city let its guard down. And he's saying to them, wake up. He's saying there is something here that is nearly not any use anymore, but there is hope. There is hope. And there's always hope. There's a way back. He says, I found your deeds unfinished. I found your deeds unfinished. And I think this maybe gets to the heart of what their problem might be, because there's an idea here of something that needs done and it's not being done, a project that's incomplete. And what the hope is that they can get things back on track, that maybe the car is in a ditch or has gone off the road, or who knows, it's maybe actually still in the garage or even in the showroom. He says to them, remember what you have received, what you were given, and what you've heard. You see, I love to talk about the church as a group of people who are involved in a project. It's so easy to get involved in any kind of organisation and feel that it should be something that is shiny and something that is really well maintained and it looks the right way. And the temptation is to see it like a digger, I've often talked about, but a digger that is in a showroom. A digger that is perfect, immaculate, so well kept, the dust kept off it, everything clean and tidy and no one allowed to touch it, looking all the way that it should, maybe with extras built into it as well, so as people are impressed by this digger. But the reality is that digger was not made to sit in a showroom. It was made to get dirty. It was made to dig things up. It was made to be part of deconstructing and then reconstructing so that plants can be grown, the buildings can be built, developments can happen, things can flourish. I've often talked about a church being the same way. That what these Jesus followers in Sardis are being reminded is that their story right from the beginning, the very first set of poems in this collection of stories to this letter at the end, has been one of a God who creates, who brings life, who created his creation to flourish and to look after and to nurture and to grow. But the story is one of then decreation, of bad choices and terrible consequences of that, of things going off track. And then the story is also of God not giving up on his project and getting involved to bring recreation, new creation, to put things back on track and to restore things. And his church, his groups of Jesus followers, his movement, the Israelites first, and then everyone who has become part of the Jesus movement, is to be part of that recreation, to be a blessing wherever they are. We talk about a blessing machine, that we're part of the blessing machine, that we're made to make a difference, to be a blessing. Jesus warns the Jesus followers in Sardis that if they don't wake up, if they don't stay alert, then they risk missing out, because God will not let things lie. God is at work. God is putting things to rights, and if they miss out on that, they might get a surprise when he is involved and they are not ready. There is hope. There is always hope. Jesus says there are a few people among you who haven't let themselves be stained, who haven't gone off track. And for them, what they are not missing out on is walking with me, which is what we were all made for. Dressed in white. And the image throughout the scriptures and in the ancient Near East of whiteness is for purity, but not only that, if you won at the games, if you finished the race, if you were part of a great victory, then you got to wear white and part of the procession. And all these images are coming together of being with God as God completes his project. Jesus then says, I will never blot out the name of that person from the book of life. And here's an image again about the fact that this story has always been about life. And there's a really, I find, fascinating image in here. I might expect that this kind of story is about Jesus saying, here's how you do things to get your name in the book of life. Or maybe Jesus says, here's how you do things to get your name back in the book of life. But that's not what this story is about. This story says their names, your name, our names are in the book of life. What we risk is missing out. What we risk is not joining in. What we risk is wasting the invitation and not being part of the project and allowing our names to end off the list at our own choice of maybe inaction, of not waking up, of not remembering, of not building on what we have, of not turning around, which is what the word repent means, and coming back to be who we were made to be and joining in with what we were made to be part of. Our names are in the book of life. We are made for the kind of life that God has made us for, which is to be with him and to be living out what it means to be his people in his creation and part of how things were made to be. The risk is not that we can't earn our way in. The risk is not that we can't earn our way back. The risk is that we miss out on what is there for us already by not joining in. Blessed is the one who reads aloud these words, and blessed are those who hear them and take to heart what is written in them, because this, Jesus says, is urgent.